Welcome back to Sustainable Today, Successful Tomorrow, where we explore real world sustainable tourism stories that actually work. In today's episode, we're talking about the ethics and impact of wildlife interaction in tourism. How can we travel in ways that really protect the animals we come to see? And what do travel businesses, destinations, and travelers need to know and do to make this happen? Let's dive in. Enjoy the episode.
Hi, Annie. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
We are actually still recording remotely because I'm still in the Netherlands, and we actually haven't seen each other in a week, which is very uncommon for us. And we'll be reunited on Sunday in Singapore because we are becoming e-residents of Estonia. Very excited. But we actually have to pick up our passports in Singapore, which is the closest pickup location from Bali.
Yeah, very convenient.
Yeah, so we'll be heading back to Bali on Wednesday, but excited to head back home, to be honest, because the Netherlands, well, it's rainy, it's dark, and
Cold.
cold, and I'm ready to get back. But let's dive in. Today, we're talking about wildlife interactions in tourism, and specifically, how can we interact with wildlife in ways that genuinely protect the animals we come to see? And to explore that, you spoke with Carlos from Futurismo Azores Adventures, a family owned company with over 30 years of experience in responsible whale watching, research, and marine conservation.
Yeah.
And in this episode, we'll listen to a few short clips from that conversation. And as always, we'll release the full interview next week. So, Anne, why do you think wildlife interactions are such an important topic in tourism?
Well, really, it's so important because travelers are, well, guests in the wild. And every time we meet wildlife, whether in the ocean, on safari, or even bird watching, we step into a gray area. We love seeing animals in their natural habitat, but if it's not done responsibly, tourism can really easily disturb, stress, or what we see more often, harm wildlife. So I think the biggest question in responsible tourism is like, how can tourism, well, genuinely protect wildlife instead of intruding on it? Well, that comes with a lot of responsibility for the travel business, the destination, but definitely also for the traveler themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about responsibility and who is actually taking responsibility.
Yeah.
And we'll dig a little deeper into that later on. But before we do so, do you have any personal wildlife experience that really stayed with you?
Ooh, good question. Well, yeah, no, I've done a lot of safaris, and what I really loved was the tree sleeping lions in Tanzania. That was really cool.
Really cool.
Diving, I actually just did my refresher dive last week, but yeah, like diving in the Great Barrier Reef, sharks, manta rays. Oh, but actually, one of my most special experiences is my, what's it called? Oh, the gorilla trekking I did in Uganda. So for gorilla trekking, you go up the mountain in 2, 3 hours. It's actually quite a hike. And you go with rangers and then you spend some time with, well, silverback mountain gorillas. And I don't know, it was so cool and humbling. They're massive and you hike up for 3 hours and then basically what you do is just sit in the grass watching gorillas. Yeah, there were babies walking around and they were just chilling and well, it was just really cool. It's really cool.
Yeah, that must have been really impressive. Weren't you scared?
Not really. Like you get like a proper safety briefing, like what do you do when they come closer? And like you also have these viral videos where you have like a guy sitting on the stairs and like there are three mountain bike gorillas is kind of petting his back. So I know like they're curious and they don't really charge you or like they don't really attack unless you get in between them and their baby or if you come too close or but like I think the briefing was really important and no, I kind of felt okay, but I don't really get scared that easily as if I know like I'm in an environment where there are rangers that can make sure the situation is as safe as it can be. Yeah, no, yeah. That was really cool.
I mean, I wouldn't want a gorilla patting my back.
Why not?
That's crazy.
So
Why not?
cool.
Well, they're huge for one, and
Mm.
I can imagine it must feel a little dangerous, but really
I
cool.
don't know. No, it was really cool. But what about you?
Yeah, I actually have to think back to an early wildlife experience. We traveled to Sri Lanka in 2016, and we watched these enormous leatherback turtles come up onto the beach to hatch their eggs. And it's been a while, so please don't fact check me. But from what I understood, they come to the beach, they lay their eggs, they bury their eggs, and then they head back into the ocean. And our guide told us that they sometimes track them as far as Thailand. And then on the day that the eggs hatch, they return to that exact spot on the beach. And yeah, well, they welcome their little babies into the world. And we were lucky enough to be there on that exact day, quite coincidentally. And we were taken onto the beach under the moonlight to watch that happen. And there was no artificial light, so we wouldn't disturb them. And we had to keep very quiet and keep our distance. But it was such a special moment. And I'm pretty sure this is something I'll never forget.
Yeah, that was definitely a very special moment. And I think also one of the highlights of our Sri Lanka trip. No, absolutely.
How well are you actually communicating sustainability? We see many travel businesses and destinations working hard, yet they still struggle to talk about it.
And maybe you feel the same. You're afraid of being seen as greenwashing, unsure what to share, or just not really connecting with your travelers. We've been there with a lot of travel brands, and we get how frustrating it is. So, with years of experience in sustainable tourism and marketing, we've created something simple to get you started.
It's called a sustainable marketing scam. You just answer a few quick questions, we'll take a look, and if it's a good fit, we'll invite you for a short call to go through your opportunities.
You can start today at goodtourisminstitute.com/scam and turn uncertainty into a clear, compelling story.
But let's get back to one of our core questions of today, which is what makes wildlife interactions such a gray area? What do you think?
Well, it's definitely a gray area because there's a very fine line, thin line between observation of wildlife and intrusion of natural habitat. So I think even when travelers have the best intentions, presence of people can influence animals like their behavior, movement patterns, their feeding, their resting times. And yeah, I talked to Carlos from Futurismo Azores and they focus on whale watching, but it doesn't only apply to whales. It's about safaris, diving, snorkeling, bird watching. Every wildlife interaction is somewhere on the spectrum, basically. And what I really liked what Carlos said in his interview is that he said animals come first always. And they actually have, I think, a tour description where they literally say animals are the most important, marine biology comes in second, and you as the customer are the least important.
Yeah, that's a really strong one. And when they communicate that upfront, you kind of agree to being the least important part of this tour. But yeah, it makes complete sense because there's still so many activities around the world that still put the traveler above animal welfare.
Yeah.
And I think a huge part of that responsibility lies with the guides because they are present for the experience. And Carlos had some interesting things to say about how they handle that. So let's listen to a clip.
We actually prepare way in advance during the anticipation phase of every single experience to the Azores. We have a huge database of scientific research that we share online. If you go to our website, you'll see all the fact sheets about every single animal. When you're going through the fact sheets, you're also seeing all the master thesis posts, all scientific articles that our research has given place to. And I think, this integrates daily because we don't have guides, we don't have marine biologists, we don't have sailors. We actually have marine biologists, our sailors and guides. So it's,
Mm.
it's all in one. And they're actually quite passionate for what they do. But when they're running you through a whale watching experience, they're also conducting research.
I really love this. It really shows that responsible wildlife tourism can really actively support conservation. But their marine biologists aren't just guiding, they're really collecting live data, monitoring populations, tracking behavior, and their travelers get to witness that and sometimes even contribute to that. And this is like a concept called citizen science, where citizens can contribute to science. And yeah, experiences like that can be so incredibly educational, transformative, basically. Funny example, though, what Carlos said is that one of the main issues they have with travelers wanting to contribute to the whale monitoring, for example, is that often they get too seasick to continue doing it. So when trying to monitor, they have to look at screens or phones to keep track of what they're seeing. And yeah, they're in the Atlantic Ocean. So too many people actually have to back out of the monitoring because they get too seasick. But at least the option is there.
Yeah, definitely. And I can really imagine getting seasick. I can get seasick instantly the minute I look at my phone when I'm in a moving vehicle. But yeah, it's a brilliant way to involve travelers in the experience, and it makes people feel like they're genuinely helping out and contributing. And yeah, that's a really important part. And I really think it can also shift mindsets because you start to understand these animals better and you kind of stop seeing them as performers.
No, exactly. I think it really helps you shift mindset. But, and this brings me to something that always shocks me, kind of, because even when people know something isn't ethical, somehow the urge for the perfect experience takes over. For example, my mom, who was visiting here on Bali, and she already told me like she wanted to hold a snake once in her life, like that feeling of holding a snake. I don't know why, but the urge. And she knew it wasn't ethical, and I told her. But then, of course, a few days later, I get the picture when she's in Ubud with a snake around her neck. And I was so frustrated because we talked about it. And then she said, like, yeah, but it looked ethical. And they said the snake was treated well. And then she kind of gets, tricked basically in an ethical adventure. But yeah, no, I was so frustrated. And actually, this morning, I saw a video that's going viral at the moment where there's a snorkeling tourist in Thailand feeding a turtle his wristband. And I really don't understand why we would place our own moment or our own video or our own feelings above an animal's well-being. And yeah, no, I really get so frustrated about it. I don't understand.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't really understand it either, but I think we've talked about it before on the podcast, actually, and that is something that tourists kind of act differently when they're on holiday,
Absolutely.
differently from what they would do at home.
Yeah.
So they kind of feel like, well, it's just this once. I'm just doing it once in a lifetime, but if everyone is doing that for their once in a lifetime moment, there's still so many people doing it. And yeah, it's a problem. But on the other hand, what I do kind of understand is when there's a lack of awareness. So when people simply don't know what is happening behind the screens, like, for example, petting a lion cub. Yeah, that might look cute, but people don't know that these animals are treated terribly. That's why managing expectations is such an important part.
Yeah.
And again, this is something that Carlos had some interesting things to say about. So let's listen to another clip.
Yeah. Let's do it.
It's bringing people together during the briefing. So in the anticipation phase of the experience, we send information to the persons, to every single guest. During the participation, it starts out with the briefing, safety briefing, expectation. So, for instance, I told you that we have fact sheets for every single species of cetaceans that go through the Azores. And we actually have the swimming and diving profile of every single animal. That was actually designed by Georgina. She is an artist and a marine biologist. And we actually asked her if she wanted to do that because it makes way more sense instead of going to a book to have this designed by someone that daily sees them. we want people to understand that whale watching is actually not going to a circus. You won't see the full whale. You won't see the whale spinning just for you. No, it's not the way it works. And we make sure to say this to the public.
Now, I feel this is such a great example of how preparation can really avoid disappointment and at the same time protect animals. I think if travelers really understand animal behavior, so what they might see, what they might not see, I think they're much more open to experiencing wildlife respectfully. I also think that when expectations are not managed, travelers will really push for the moment they think they deserve. And I think that's really where unethical wildlife encounters happen because they have this expectation and then they will push to actually make that happen.
Yeah, definitely. I think you see this a lot on safaris in Africa, of course, but also with something like dolphin watching in Lovina up in the north of Bali, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. Because there, the main issue is that there are too many boats chasing all the dolphins just for the travelers to be able to see the dolphins. And what we also saw earlier this summer, also went viral on social media, was the wildebeest migration in Tanzania. I think everyone saw videos of that where there were a lot of safari vehicles blocking the exit during a river crossing. So travelers could get a better view. And I actually saw also pictures of like rows and rows of safari vehicles with actually the travelers sitting on the hood of the car. So not even just inside, but really they're positioned there to have a better view. But because of that, some of the wildebeest actually drowned because they were unable to exit the river. And I think these things happen a lot more often than we like to admit. And with this specific situation, everyone knew about it because it went so viral.
Yeah, those videos are terrible to watch. And I agree that it probably happens a lot more than we know about because this is just one case that went viral. And yeah, probably it happens a lot more and maybe on a small scale, but it does happen a lot. And I think this shows exactly how important the role of a guide is. And not only a guide, but regulations as well. It matters so much. And it shouldn't be a gray area, but I feel like it sometimes still is
Yeah.
because guides want happy customers. And sometimes they feel like the only way to get a happy customer is by bending the rules a bit. And we've experienced this ourselves in safaris in Kenya, for example, where guides are so eager to please and go above and beyond for you to be happy and take the perfect picture that even though you are telling them, like, I'm okay keeping my distance, I'm okay not going off road, that they still do it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And then they're also even a little surprised that you don't want to go off road. Because I once had a guy said, "Oh, you don't want to see the animal up close?" And I was like, "Well, I do, but I don't want to break a rule, a wildlife rule, to make that happen." But I do think there's a lot of pressure. And for example, the wildebeest migration example, if there are already 30 cars standing there, there's a lot of pressure from, I think, the people in the vehicle, but also the guides to also get that magical moment. Because, of course, it's amazing to watch a river crossing. They're following the first one doing it to give travelers a similar experience.
Yeah, but if everyone's doing it, doesn't make it okay.
No, no, absolutely. But it does happen, obviously. There is,
Yeah, of course.
if someone breaks the rule, it's a lot easier to follow than being the first one to break it. And I think, yes, the guide should make travelers happy, but what Carlos said, put wildlife first and make the customer aware of this. And that could also mean like pointing out bad behavior from other guides. Like, we are not doing that because just make them aware. I think communication here is also very important.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Guides have a real responsibility, travel businesses have a real responsibility. But I do feel that destinations have a responsibility as well, especially when it comes to something like regulating wildlife watching. I think the Azores is a great example of that because Carlos had some things to say about that. I mean, he had a massive list of all the regulations and he could just list it. Let's listen to him list the regulations.
There's approaches zone that you can follow. So if the animal is going like this, you can just approach from here. And you have to obey this very, very strictly. If the animal comes to you, you have to stop the boat. You cannot be moving with the animal. You have to stay as still as you can. You cannot make a lot of noise. You cannot chase them. You cannot separate or isolate a single individual. You cannot swim with whales. You cannot use sonars. You cannot do night observation. You cannot change direction really quick. You cannot exceed the speed of the animals. So all of this has to be done.
Well, this is definitely destination stewardship at its best. So very clear rules. And what you said, Carlos, was just listing them, not thinking about it, not reading it. And these clear approaches on speed limits, no chasing, no sudden engine changes, how many boats can be at wheels at the same time. All these things are so important. And the rules only work when operators are trained, monitored, and especially held accountable. So, what we talked about in the wildebeest migration, what should have happened is that the first one doing it would have been called out for, "What are you doing? Don't do that, and we're going to report you." That should be something that would have been the ideal situation, and then all of this would never happened. And Futurismo actually shares all of these regulations with their travelers as well in their briefing. And they do this so they can be held accountable. So it's really all about transparency so that travelers know, okay, this is what the boat can do today. So it's managing expectations. But it's also that if, for example, the captain gets too close, that they can think like, oh, this is not okay.
Your clients can actually hold you responsible for your behavior, which is
Exactly.
good because it works both ways.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's very true. And I think overall, without regulation, wildlife tourism just becomes a free for all. And I think
Yeah.
when this happens, animals suffer. I think that's the
Yeah.
conclusion.
Yeah, and I think that's something that we're seeing in Lovina, the example for the dolphin watching we mentioned before. And a lot of travelers don't really realize how much these rules actually protect the animals, but also the quality of the experience. I mean, if businesses keep running these experiences irresponsibly, you will eventually damage the ecosystem and maybe even to a point where the animals simply leave.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's at the same time a great reminder that responsible wildlife experiences are not just another activity. They're this collaboration between the destination who sets the rules, travel businesses who follow them and will do better, and then travelers who show respect, patience, and hopefully also hold the travel business accountable for how they run the activity. It's definitely the collaboration, yeah, that I think really protects wildlife and tourism.
I want to come back to the role of research for a minute because in your interview with Carlos, you really touched down on how tourism can support long term conservation. So, how exactly do you think that can be achieved?
Well, I think the supported long-term conservation is really the exciting part of wildlife tourism because when wildlife tourism is done well, it can fund research, create awareness among travelers, and really inspire people to protect what they've seen during the experience. Citizen science, what we talked about earlier, where travelers can contribute, is really becoming a lot more popular. So, travelers joining manta ray ID projects, turtle monitoring, coral restoration, and these are the contributing travel experiences we mentioned in our trends episode. And these experiences are not just for fun, they're both fun and meaningful contributions. And they have, on the one hand, that it's just really amazing to be able to contribute, but it also changes how travelers see the world and hopefully making better decisions in the future.
It's just a great way to actually add value to your experience as well. You're not just doing something good, you're actually improving your experience. And I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure you'll get amazing reviews from your clients for doing experiences like this,
Yeah, no, absolutely. Unless you get seasick.
unless you get seasick.
There's definitely something special about yeah, contributing to make sure that you're really making something better, that you're protecting turtles, that you're supporting the regrowth of a coral reef that in its turn attracts a lot of fish and sharks and to well rebalances the entire ecosystem. I think that's an amazing thing to know that you contributed to that, even though it was a half day.
Yeah, it gives you a good feeling. And
Yeah.
I think that's what it's all about in the end. Like giving travelers the feeling they did something good and they actually did.
And yeah, I
But
think that's a good part they actually did because
yeah,
wildlife comes
well,
first.
yeah, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
But before we wrap up, I'd like to talk about one more thing, and that's marketing wildlife experiences. Because, and this comes back to managing expectations, I guess. If you sell the wrong impression, travelers will arrive with the wrong expectations, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what you're sharing online is attracting travelers for a reason. It's appealing to them. And if it then turns out it's not possible when they're trying to book it, for example, they'll be disappointed. And I think responsible wildlife encounters are literally letting the wild animal be to not disturb them in any way. So keeping distance, no touching, no feeding wristbands, not making noise, not chasing them, really letting them live their best lives in their natural habitat. And if they want to stay close, they can. And you see that a lot with dolphins or seals, for example, but it's their free will. It's important. They can swim to the other side if they want to. And I think it's so important to manage expectations, especially with wildlife and sharing unethical encounters, because it's giving unrealistic expectations. And then I think unrealistic expectations is one of the biggest causes of unethical encounters.
This is actually increasing at the moment because we've seen a lot of AI generated images recently
Yeah.
about people petting lions, swimming with dolphins, and it sets travelers up with the complete wrong impression.
Yeah, no, it drives me crazy because especially the pictures where travelers are lounging by the pool, surrounded and cuddling with 20 lion or tiger cubs. And it looks cute, obviously, but one, it's not possible. And two, it's not something you want travelers to encourage asking for because 100% there is some unethical tour operator out there that will think this is a good idea. I'll go start offering that because there are unfortunately travel businesses out there who put travelers first and not the animal. Think about canned hunting, snakes around your neck or riding elephants. I don't know, but it's not something you want travelers to encourage asking for.
Yeah, I've actually seen these companies be called out on the internet and defending these images. And that is such a bad thing because by sharing images like this, you're saying this is fine, this is
Yeah,
normal behavior, and
yeah.
you are normalizing this behavior.
I think they also said something like, yeah, but it's AI. But AI is also becoming so much more realistic that I think, well, definitely part of travelers will think that it's actually something that could happen and they will start looking for it. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So, how do you think these experiences should be marketed responsibly?
Well, to start off, to really use real photos, not AI, that reflect ethical distance, natural behavior, and to really highlight the experience. So, the learning, the contribution, citizen science, the background of the animal. And I think it's really important to be transparent about what travelers can and can't do. And this is also something that we encourage travel businesses that we work with is to also have very clear wildlife guidelines, animal welfare policy, so that it's also really clear to the traveler, okay, this is how we treat wildlife and this is how we run our experiences. And this is also how you can contribute in the correct way. So I think it's all about transparency and to really communicate clear guidelines. And I think it's kind of annoying that you can now have to defend yourself as an ethical travel business why you're not doing it. And it should definitely be the other way around. But unfortunately, we're not there yet. But the best we can do is be transparent, use real photos, and really emphasize that amazing feeling when you see them in the wild without any disturbance, because it is a magical feeling that I think a lot more people should experience.
Yeah, I think in the end, it's all about framing these experiences honestly and not really selling a fantasy. And if you're doing that, you're setting travelers up for something respectful and responsible. We've said this before, but you can still highlight the positive sides and you don't have to focus on the negative so much. So I think what you said about having to defend yourself for not doing it, well, you can, of course, and you should explain why you're not doing it, but you can still highlight the positive sides of the responsible ways that you're doing it.
No, absolutely. And that should definitely happen. And that's definitely the way to go. But I do think it's kind of, well, so strange that you have to defend yourself for not wanting to disturb wildlife because you have to in the world that we live in at the moment.
I'm not sure if I agree. I think you can still stick to the positive story as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. It should be the positive first, but there are still a lot of requests from, for example, people saying, I want to ride an elephant. So to avoid that, saying that on your website, if you offer Thailand experiences, is kind of needed to not waste your time writing a proposal for someone who wants it.
Do you think that if you only show like realistic images from what's going on, realistic stories about what you're doing in these experiences without telling the negative side, like we are not doing elephant rides because if you're leaving that out, but just highlight the positive sides of the experiences that you are doing, do you think you will still have a lot of requests for elephant riding?
I wouldn't say a lot, but I do think it's definitely happening that people still request it. And I think it's needed that if you are focused on ethical wildlife adventures, that you make that very clear. So that does mean addressing what you don't do. But you should, what you said, like, is definitely true. Is that you have to make sure it's a positive story. But I do feel I feel it's a responsibility to make sure that you explain you're not doing it and why, to also raise more awareness about why it's not a good idea.
Long discussion that we could have, but we're not going to because it's time to wrap up again already. So, for me, the key takeaways I think are that wildlife experiences are always a gray area, and you can start off in like a responsible way, but it can quickly turn into intrusion when you are chasing an animal or you are getting too close, or there's so many ways that this can turn into intrusion.
Yeah.
And aside from that, preparation is important, expectation management is really important, and that can make a huge difference. And I think finally, responsibility. There's responsibility for destinations, there's responsibility for travel businesses, travelers, and they all share the responsibility to protect wildlife.
Yeah.
Anything that you'd like to add to that list?
Not really, but I do think that if we, and we do, genuinely love wildlife, we just need to adjust how we interact with them. So, and I think a lot of travel businesses are already doing it, but it's really about not chasing the perfect moment, respecting the animal, respecting the ecosystem, and especially respecting the rules that keep them safe. And I think that's when, if everyone follows that, is when wildlife tourism becomes truly meaningful, and not only for the traveler, but especially for the wildlife. Because, yeah, I really want to quote Carlos here, it's wildlife first, then the marine biologist or any research is focused on preserving wildlife, and then the traveler. And I think, yeah, we can definitely wrap up with that. But wildlife comes first. I think that is just the number one rule.
Yeah. And if you always stick to that, you'll have a great chance of doing it responsibly.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. Animal welfare is such an important part of responsible tourism, and whenever travelers meet wildlife, we step straight into a gray area. As a travel industry, we have a responsibility to protect wildlife and to educate our travelers so they can make informed, ethical choices. What are your personal no-goes when it comes to wildlife and tourism? We would love to hear your take. In the meantime, If you're enjoying the podcast, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss any future episodes. Thank you for listening and hope to see you next time.